Hello, everyone. It's yet another lightning talk today with Paul Simmonds. We are here virtually on the first day of lockdown in the UK. So, welcome, Paul.
Hi, Vlad.
And without further ado, let's go in. I will share the slides. And Paul, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. So yes, the top 10 reasons identity ecosystems fail. The assertion today really is, look, identity is in a real mess, especially when you try to do it as a global ecosystem. So what does that actually mean? And here's the problem. Why is this important today? It says it here, attempts to develop an identity ecosystem that's truly interoperable and can be trusted by multiple disparate parties to date have failed spectacularly. Quietly died, or worse. Yeah, they stagger on, adding yet another identity system into the mix. And if you don't believe me, let's use a UK example. This is what the UK government inland revenue site used to look like. And as you can see, username and password. Yes, it was fairly old school, but you could use a digital certificate. This is back in the days when PKI was king. What does it look like now? Here it is. You can choose how you want to log in. You can still sign in with your government gateway. You can use UK Gov Verify. Dead man standing, as they say. You can sign with a digital identity from another European country. Well, there's masses to choose from. And yeah, guess what? Verify, you can use 4 or 5 different at the moment, but as of next year, it's only going to be 2 because they're pulling out. So, identity is a real mess. UK Verify has cost us, the taxpayers in the UK, about £154 million. That's not counting what the individual commercials partners, obviously, who are pulling out, many of them have spent on it. The original identity card scheme, £5.4 billion. NSTIC in the US, $20 million worth of seeds. The Kenyan high-end project, $74 million. It is an absolute mess. So where does this work originate? So here's where it started, the Jericho Forum Identity Commandments, and then that work's been continued within the Global Identity Foundation. So there's a white paper. If you want to go and read what I'm talking about today, there's a 2-page primer called Why Identity Ecosystems Fail, and you can freely download it. So let's get straight into it. Fail number 1. This is a reliance of the locus of control. If you read the original Jericho Forum commandments, not the identity commandments, the original commandments, it talks about this thing called a locus of control. And basically a locus of control is really simple. It's, if you give it all to me, I can make it work for you. And I'm as guilty as anyone of doing that. In my days as a global CISO, back in the late 90s, we would say to folks, look, just make sure it all operates with Active Directory because we're a Microsoft shop, and we, security and IT, will make it all work for you. That's not the real world these days. And unfortunately, that approach does not scale. So we've got a problem. And the problem manifests itself in a number of ways. And obviously, we talk about Microsoft, Google are just as guilty, Facebook are as guilty. The blockchain operators are also guilty because, as much as they say blockchain is distributed, it still relies on a single controlled schema for the blockchain, and someone's got to manage it. And the problem is really simple. If we want a global identity ecosystem that truly works globally, then you've got to answer this question. Why would the Chinese government trust a US system holding Chinese citizen information? And they wouldn't, of course, because they turn around and say, we are the Chinese government, we are authoritative for those Chinese citizens, therefore we need to hold that, and we are the authoritative source of that information. And as a result, everyone does their own thing, whether the Indians with 1.2 billion people, the Chinese with 1.2 billion people, the Americans with 350 million, 360 million people, etc., etc. Governments, particularly with spooks whispering in their ears, saying we must be at the core to control our citizens. And it's a real problem. And while we have that mentality, that reliance on we must control this because it's the only way we can work it, then we will never solve the problem. So what does this look like? What are our design criteria as a result of this fail? So the first one is your identity systems should only hold authoritative identity information. Simple as that. And you'll hear this one time and time again. So the Chinese are authoritative for their citizen information. Absolutely. The British are authoritative for my citizen information because guess what? They issued my birth certificate, etc., etc. But we should then minimize the reliance on identity systems holding non-authoritative identity information. So the last thing you want to do is to put anything other into an identity system that you look after other than you are truly authoritative for. So fail number 2. This is a biggie, and this really takes getting your head around, and it took me, I have to say, an awful long time to get my head around this one, is there is a lack of anonymity at the root of an entity's identity. So unless you have 100% anonymity at the root of an identity, you cannot do privacy and you cannot disconnect disparate personas. Now, I'll talk in a second about what personas are. And again, if you want to understand this better, there is a nice 2-page primer. Go steal it, go read it. Everything that we do is Creative Commons open source. So the key thing here is that entities, particularly people, need to be assured that their identity attributes are under my or their control. In doing that, you ensure privacy. You allow them to connect disparate assertions, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute. It enables, particularly, relevant today, trusted e-voting. Wouldn't that be nice, especially if you're an American at the moment? And the key one here is it facilitates the entity to have both primacy and agency over the various attributes of their identity. And this is what people want. We did a piece of work. We went out and, asked the typical 100 anonymous respondents who should be in control of your personally identifiable information. And they were quite clear, as you can see from the graph. Me, I should. It's my personally identifiable information. I should be in control of it. And then we asked them who should control how your personal identifiable information is used. In other words, who has agency over the use of that information? And again, guess what? 85% said me. So this is what people want. Unfortunately, most governments think it's the bottom two. But that's not what the people tell them. So going back to fail number 2, let's look at what that actually means in terms of a design criteria for a global ecosystem. So the design criteria is we have to have anonymity at the root of an entity's identity. And again, I'm talking about entities, not people. And again, we'll see why in a second. And you have to enable the entity to be able to issue cryptographically provable assertions from multiple disparate authoritative sources, which enables you to provide context. And context is really, really important when we come to identity. So if that's fail number 2, fail number 3 is, before I go on, just finally, sameness is the key to anonymity. So humans do sameness. We use faces, but actually most computer systems are just interested in you are the same entity when you first registered on our system. Are today, will be tomorrow. We do faces as human beings. So when I first see you or first meet you, then I register your face, I log it into my memory store. And guess what? Today, I can tell you're still the same entity that I first met. And guess what? You will be tomorrow. So the principle of sameness is really key. We don't usually care about who the person is, although we do add facets of your identity as we get to know someone. But sameness and faces is what humans do. Sameness and typically login credentials is what we do today. Sameness and crypto is what we should be doing tomorrow. And I said I'd talk about personas. Personas are really key to context and also privacy. So if you think about, this is me. So this is I am me, what we call a core identity. And, you know, what I'm sharing with you today is my security and identity persona. And that's all you need to know about me. You can look me up in LinkedIn and everything else, but ultimately that's what you need to know. But I have two disparate personas, and they totally are disparate. They've got no relationship to another. So here's my other disparate, or one of my other disparate personas. I happen to be a whitewater kayak instructor, and it's no big secret. The key is this, is that segregation of personas allows privacy and primacy. I'm only sharing it with you because I choose to, not because someone else lets you know. And there is a total, in this case, segregation of attributes. So I have a bunch of security attributes alongside my professional persona. I have a bunch of kayaking attributes alongside my kayak instructor persona. And if I went for a job as a security, as a CISO, then actually, would I offer you my kayaking attributes? Of course not. It would be totally irrelevant to that, and vice versa. So on to number 3. So we've sort of hinted at this already, maintaining or using attributes that are non-authoritative. And, you know, how many of you had an email during lockdown that from a company that you last dealt with over 5 years ago, assuring you of their support during lockdown? I've had a few. Or the phone call from the company selling services, and you sort of say, well, hang on a second, who do you think I work for? And they mention a company name that was at least 3 or 4 organizations back. Maintaining or using attributes that are non-authoritative basically are a total and utter waste of time, and relying on them is even worse. So organizations that insist on storing all these attributes about an entity, which can be changed, they can be revoked, they can become they're non-authoritative, and they definitely go stale over time. And of course, they can also be unknowingly incorrect. All of those result in a flawed risk calculation when you actually try to use them. Or in the case of the salesman who rings me saying, I do still work at ICI. You know, they get very short shrift from me, and I put the phone down on them. So what are our design criteria here? So again, you should only be maintaining the attributes for which you are the definitive authoritative source. And then conversely, the other side of that coin is you should only be accepting identity attributes from the definitive authoritative source. So if you want to check the fact that Paul Simmonds is over 18, notwithstanding the fact we're on a video chat here and I've got grey hair, but if you want to check that I'm over 18 because I want to buy that bottle of alcohol, then the authoritative source for that is my citizen persona signed by UK government because they issued my birth certificate, not someone else. So fail number 4, federating identity systems. So federating identity systems basically in general is a complete waste of time. Why? Because the stuff in italics here indicates, you know, if A trusts B and B trusts C, then does A trust C? And the answer is we haven't got a clue. In general, federation breaks down totally at n equals 3. So if A trusts B, B trusts C, C trusts D, does A trust D, all bets are off. So the problem again is this one of context. Without understanding the context in which C did the identity verification, is going to offer me a whole bunch of indemnity if I use that information, and is how they identity proofed me relevant to how I want to use that information? Because if it's not, it's a complete and utter waste of time. So what normally happens is that the trust breakdown breaks down at n equals 2, n equals 3, whatever. And what normally happens is people just go back to saying, look, I don't trust this enough, so I'm just going to go back to identity proofing them myself and starting from scratch. So banks, particularly who have to do KYC, insist on them seeing your original documents, and you have to walk into a local bank of that branch with a whole bunch of original paperwork, which of course is getting more and more details because no one these days in the electronic world has original energy bills or whatever, because they're all coming over the internet. So we need to do something for the future. And what are our design criteria? Very simple. Only consume identity attributes asserted directly, n equals 1, by the authoritative source. Fail number 5. Fixation on my product solving all your problems. For most of you who have heard me talk before will know what I think about security salesmen. They're not my favorite people, mainly because most of them don't have a clue what they're talking about. There are some good ones out there, but most of them don't. And the problem is most companies get into this myopic vision of, we solve this problem and thinking we can expand it to solve identity in general. So, if you want a few examples, again, let's name some names here. Microsoft, the answer is Active Directory. Now, what's your problem? Certainly less true today than it was, but certainly in the 90s and the early noughties, that was very much the mantra. Google, who will, shamelessly tell you, go and look at our Beyond Corp Zero Trust implementation, which is brilliant as long as you use Google's identity system. So again, it's that locus of control problem. People like the GSM Association, GSMA, the SIM is our key here, and the SIM is key to an identity. So let's expand it to people, IoT, or even a universal login system. Just understand the limitations of what the SIM does. So ultimately, what we're talking about here is levels of trust in an identity. Trust is enhanced when you can consume authoritative attributes from any device, system, or source that is authoritative. And it fails when you're limited to a single source of someone else's truth, over which generally you have no control as the person taking the risk. So what does that lead to our design criteria? Yeah, ensure any product that is authoritative in their area can contribute to an overall risk calculation. In other words, they're just part of the picture. Fail number 6. Generally, a total lack of context in the risk calculations. So not understanding the context in which a risk calculation is asserted, or an attribute is asserted, restricts the richness of any risk decision I can make. Yeah, so if I can look at attributes and I can understand those attributes in context, then a better risk calculation performed. So consider the little old lady who walks down the high street. If it is daytime, she might be very happy to do that. Her risk calculation says, yes, in context, i.e. daylight, I'm happy to walk down the high street. Am I happy to do that at 11:30 at night when it's dark and when there's a whole different bunch of people out and about? Maybe I am not. My risk calculation changes. So just having the walk down High Street is not good enough. You have to understand walk down the High Street in context. And context is key across the whole thing. And the problem is when there is a non-authoritative party in that chain, then context is usually lost or severely reduced. So the design criteria, again, is full contextual information must be communicated to the person taking the risk to enable them to take a better risk calculation. Number 7. The ecosystem only supports people, not all entities. So this is UK Verify. The UK's said rather failing identity ecosystem that came on the back of a totally failed UK identity card scheme. This is from the Register back in 2016. And as it says there, HMRC's, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs view on Verify is that it won't ever handle businesses, said the insider. Why? Because UK Verify was set up to only identify people. And HMRC said, look, we need to do taxes for businesses and we need agents to be able to register to work on the behalf of people or businesses. And if you don't handle agency and you don't handle business entities, then guess what? Verify is not fit for purpose. So without encompassing all entities and understanding persona and context, it's exponentially more difficult to make an ecosystem work. So what does that look like? Design criteria, any ecosystem must encompass all 5 entity types and the concepts of persona and context. And when we say entity types, this is what we mean. So, yeah, we all know about people, and this is what people fixate on when it comes to identity. But there are 5 entity types, which is why I try to be very careful to use entities rather than people. There are devices, computers, phones, IoT, vehicles, printers, PVRs, bring your own device, etc., etc., etc. Organizations under law are a legal person. So organizations, families are organizations, organizational groupings, clubs, whatever. If we're going to make a decision about saying, actually, we want to, for example, rent a movie out such that the entire family can watch it, we need to understand a family organization as part of the context to enable the family to watch it. If I can assert I am a member of Simmonds family, then the Simmonds family are all permitted to watch that particular movie. But again, without that, while we fixate on humans only, we can't make that work that easily. We kludge it. Code is an entity type, particularly self-protecting data. So self-protected data actually is code, therefore is entity type code. Code is really important. If I want to update a device, I need the code to have identity, probably belonging to an organization. So I can say actually only code signed by Microsoft and the organization to which this laptop belongs is permitted to actually install itself. Simple rule, driven by the entity of not people now, but an organizational identity and a code identity. And finally, agents. People always say, what are agents? Well, agents are human agents. So my PA, who has agency over my corporate credit card to book flights on my behalf. Again, it's delegated agency. AI programs, obviously Siri and OK Google are very much at the early stages of agents, electronic agents, and then we have a whole bunch of AI or learning programs that sit over the top, and they're all types of agent. So let's get on to fail number 8, and probably the most overused cartoon in the history of identity presentations. I said deliberately put the credit for Peter Steiner, but also the date, which is really important. This dates back to 1993. And on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. Fail number 8, not understanding the level of immutable linkage to the entity, particularly with people. Yeah. So most authentication credentials that we use out there, most associated attributes are self-asserted. Personal email, Facebook, Twitter, even LinkedIn, even if we're using a validated account, say a Twitter verified account, the problem is really simple. First of all, the majority of that is self-asserted, but more importantly, when someone is using that account, with what degree of certainty do we know that the entity at the end of the keyboard or screen is actually the entity that is being represented, the person that is being represented? And of course, that might be a system that you're talking to. It might be a government system if you're doing your tax return, rather than someone trying to spoof it. So it's not just people, it's entities. So not being able to understand the certainty with which the entity making the assertion is actually the entity. And again, am I going to know definitively? No, but I need to know with a degree of certainty how, in the case of people particularly, the wetware, the me, is connected to the firmware, the device. And without that information, it's just someone else who has my password. So, design criteria: assertions must include the method and level of immutability of the entity to the assertion. We're getting there to number 10. Fail number 9, turning a variable into a binary. Yet trust levels are never binary. They're always a variable, but most authentication systems turn a variable into a binary, maybe the entity. And I hate to say this, that the IT department and even the security team are probably the biggest guilty party for this, because they sign off on, in a large corporation, probably Active Directory. An Active Directory you sign into with your username and password. If you're lucky, you're using some kind of two-factor authentication. But at the end of the day, the IT department, known as the managers of Active Directory, make a decision that you are who you say you are. And they then pass that on as a binary 1, you are Paul Simmonds, to every other system in your environment. What is wrong with this picture? It doesn't enable you to take a risk-based decision, because IT have taken any kind of trust level or degree of certainty variable out of that. So whereas I might have been Paul Simmonds and I was only using a poor password, if it then passes on binary 1, this person is Paul Simmonds. If I'm accessing the lunchtime menu at the canteen, it doesn't really matter. But if I'm accessing something truly sensitive like pre-patent information or the corporate results that are going to the city, then actually that system should be looking at how certain are you that this person is really Paul Simmonds. And of course, if you ask that question to Active Directory says they are Paul Simmonds. No debate. So what is the design criteria? Variables must never be represented as binary. So all identity attributes context must be sent to the relying party, the entity taking the risk, so that they can evaluate it. And this comes out of Cloud Security Alliance. It comes from version 3. I don't think this is in version 4. But anyway, the entity taking the risk must be able to evaluate all identity and attribute information. So making a risk-based decision about access to data or systems based on the trusted identity and attributes of all the entities and components in the transaction chain. And that little statement alone, in my opinion, is incredibly powerful. So finally, 10. Reduce privacy and consolidating attributes from disparate persona. So this is where we allow an entity, whether it's commercial or government, doesn't matter, to actually contain or manage, because guess what? It's convenient, both for you and for someone else, the person consuming stuff, to actually collect and control multiple disparate attributes about you. And it places me at risk of misuse by the holders, anyone who hacks it, the criminals, and of course, corrupt governments. And don't assume that just because your government isn't corrupt today, it won't be corrupt tomorrow. There are masses of examples out there of very benign governments that have gone totally bad over the last 200 years. So collecting people into a super large repository, while there might be companies and governments out there who would really like to do that because they can either control their population or they can make money out of it, or both, is a really, really bad idea. And it's liable to abuse, either malicious or accidental. And if you actually look at, go on to Have I Been Pawned, Troy Hunt's phenomenal website, and just put your information in and see how much of your information has leaked out into the dark web via the hackers who have hacked other people's identity systems that had bits and pieces of my information. And of course, because they have my email address, which is what Have I Been Pawned uses, then of course they can reference all those bits of information together against that information. And trust me, I've looked at mine. You know everything about me, from where I live to my postcode to my age, my where I was born, my mother's maiden name, you name it, you can find it out on the dark web. So design criteria, again, minimize the attributes held to only those for which the organization, again, is truly authoritative. You're getting the picture, I hope, of what we need to do. So those are the 10. We can have a debate online or offline about whether there are others. I'm sure there are. What are our key takeaway points? Oh, hang on a second, Vlad. You've just... Thank you. What are our key takeaway points? So 100% anonymity at the root of an entity's identity. There we are. Number one, absolutely. Really, really important. Number two, only sign or attest to attributes for which you are authoritative. Do identity identically. That's a real tongue twister for all entity types. Enable each party in the transaction, remembering risk is bidirectional but asymmetric. Enable each party in a transaction to make a risk calculation about whether they want to transact. So if someone asks you for attributes that you don't want to give, your choice is to walk away from that transaction. Never turn a probability of variable into a binary. Only do your part in the chain and no more. Put the entity in control of asserting their attributes. In other words, if you ask me for my attributes, it's me that should be giving them to you, not someone else. And finally, and this is not blockchain, because blockchain fails under the locus of control rule, it has to be 100% decentralized with no locus of control whatsoever. I commend these to you if you're interested in learning more. There are various links around, but the Identity 3.0 principles, go look at them, go study them, and thank you.
Thank you, Paul. It's been really good. You've answered my question. How can people contact contact with you. So yeah, you guys can see it here. I've got one maybe tricky question, Paul, and that is all these 10 failures and the best practice how to do it actually correctly. Is it being done somewhere correctly?
No. In a word, it isn't. And there's lots of work going on in this area. Most of it is, if you talk to governments, they're all based around, the big boys out there who want lots of government money. We will build you a bigger, better database. You've got the blockchain folk who are going, yeah, we can decentralize identity. And they've seemed to have forgotten the whole concept of, or haven't understood locus of control. Because ultimately, if a blockchain is designed and managed and forked, more importantly, via an American organization, are the Chinese going to trust it? Are the Indians going to trust it? No, of course not. Absolutely, they're not. And actually, blockchain doesn't scale. Not true blockchain. Blockchain won't handle the amount of throughput. So there are ways to do it. The work out of Jericho originally has some really good ideas on how to do it, and has actually taken this to lab test where we've shown it can be done. But is there anything you can go out and try for real today? The answer is no. But if we don't come together as a global body of security and identity professionals to work on a better way of doing this, we're not going to crack this such that it works globally.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, I agree. For the benefit of the audience, either now or when they watch it recorded, what do you think they can do to push this forward?
Start talking about the principles when you look at identity. And I say to people, people ask me, so what can I do today? And the answer is, well, if you're in a business and if I still had my CISO hat on, then I'd be looking at the future. This is the direction we need to go. But I'd be looking at, being pragmatic and saying, actually, but I need to buy some products in the interim. But the key here is to understand where we need to get to as an industry and make sure that everything you do today and what you buy today is taking us in that direction as a company, so that we are not going in a disparate direction from where we should be going. Get involved. If you've got thoughts and ideas, go read the stuff that's on our website, and actually go out and get involved with us. And please throw us some money, because ultimately we would love to pay some people to go and do some serious work and actually build this. We have a model, we have a beta, we have a lab test that's all been done. But now is the time where we actually need to build a global technology demonstrator. And the nice thing is, because you do your bit, then all you have to do is build your bit of it, and then it all works as one. So, is it expensive? The answer is no. And academics can build their bit and try their bit. Companies can build their bit. But we need people to throw us some central money to fund, especially the sort of the crypto and the code that needs to be common to everything.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. We don't seem to have any questions now, but of course this is recorded, so you can also post your comments under YouTube, and I'm sure Paul will respond. As a closing remark, I'd love to remind people and kind of inform, we are organizing these lightning talks. Should be half an hour. Today will be a little bit overshot, but I think definitely believe it was worth it. We have it bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks. Have a look on our website, and most importantly, if you have something to share, please on the website sign up, send us your ideas, and next time it could be you here with me.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Paul.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vlad.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.